All righty. Welcome, cryptocurrency investing community. My name is Mark Anstead, and I am here with one of the team members of rLoop. Brent, it is an absolute pleasure to have you out here.
Oh, thanks for inviting me to be here, Mark.
Not a problem. So, how did you guys get started? I think before we get into that, explain to our community what exactly is a Hyperloop. I think that's one of the big up and coming terms that maybe people have seen it on the news or read about it online. A lot of people here are probably familiar with blockchain and cryptocurrencies, but the term Hyperloop, not something that a lot of people are familiar with. So what is a Hyperloop and what is rLoop doing with that?
So the Hyperloop is a proposed transportation system. About, I guess, 5 years ago now, Elon Musk popularized it. The idea is that it's an energy elegant and very fast travel, ground-based travel system. So we have vehicles that they call pods, and we're levitating that off of the ground. So we're eliminating rolling resistance. And then we stick it in a tube or in a tunnel, and we evacuate most of the air out of the tube or tunnel. So there's no air friction. And as a result, those vehicles can travel very fast and very efficiently. The idea is to be able to achieve a maximum speed of about 765 miles per hour. That's about 1,200 kilometers an hour. And being able to connect cities that were previously half a day or more of a drive in less time than your commute from the suburb to the urban center would be currently. So the initial route that was examined was Los Angeles to San Francisco. On a good day, it's a 5 to 6 hour drive. With the Hyperloop, it would be 25 to 30 minutes kind of thing. So what that lets us do is you can now live in LA and work in San Francisco, or vice versa. You could go to a social event, a dinner, a meeting in the evening and get home before bed. But it also lets us, I mean, if you look at it from a cargo's standpoint as well, we can move cargo very quickly and efficiently between cities. We can now move ports out of city centers or away from valuable land. We can move airports away from urban centers and have them connected by a Hyperloop. And it's all it's a totally electric system, so there's no combustion involved. And when they were examining that route from LA to San Francisco, they said, if we were to line the tube with solar panels, it's likely to generate enough energy to support itself, if not feed more into the grid. That's obviously very lofty claims, and it's technology that's still in development. But there's a lot of major players who've gotten involved in the recent years. When Elon first announced it in 2013, several years went by and there was not a lot of activity. And so Elon and SpaceX said, we're going to sponsor a competition. We're going to build the facilities to test scaled prototypes. And we're going to open it up to independent and student engineering teams. That was on June 15th, 2015. And that's the day that rLoop was born. So they announced this competition. They released some guidelines for entering. And someone on the SpaceX subreddit put a post saying, hey, I've looked at the criteria for the competition. There's nothing that would exclude us from forming a group and participating. Would anybody else be interested? And people started to submit their names, what their background was, what level of involvement they could participate. and we formed a team, and we started working within the context of the SpaceX competition.
Very
That's how we
cool.
started.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most incredible stories about, I guess, just trusting each other and really just focusing on a goal. Who communicated on the subreddit to actually end up working together? Because it's one thing to just say, all right, let's just do this and figure something out. And then the other half of it is actually putting in the work and getting it done.
Yeah.
How did all of that end up happening? Like, it's just incredible.
Well, I think the post was made, first of all, in the right community. The SpaceX community is made up of people in industry, people who've retired from industry, students working towards getting involved in aerospace or in engineering, and fans of SpaceX and Elon Musk. So having that kind of competition that was sponsored by SpaceX and Elon definitely helped to attract people initially. And we started just with like a Google sheet to sign up, and people would sign up and say, "This is how I can participate. This is how much time I can participate, and this is my expertise or my education." And then we kind of worked fairly quickly to find tools that would facilitate our collaboration online. So we started with the subreddit. We started with some communication platforms. Eventually, we landed on Slack, which we still use to this day. And that was a great way for all of us to come in. We had people all over the world, so all different time zones, to chat, but also to have a history of what was discussed. We used various tools to kind of try and capture that knowledge. And it started to kind of snowball. We were kind of subject to the aggressive schedule that SpaceX had set for the competition. So there were very clear milestones and timelines associated with those. So we could easily kind of work backwards and say, okay, this is where we need to end up. This is where we are now. Here are the points we have to hit before this date. And people just picked up the torch and ran with it. And it was really interesting because there was this kind of free flow of knowledge and ideas. I think there was somewhat of a liberating factor being kind of online. Nobody knows who's on the other end of that account. It lets you be kind of unrestricted in terms of any kind of anxieties or social hierarchies or professional hierarchies that might inhibit that kind of free flow of information. So it was just like this outpouring of ideas, and we kind of had the philosophy that everybody can have a voice, and the team will scrutinize and rally behind the best idea to move forward. Yeah, so that's kind of how it started to snowball.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations to you guys on winning the competition and all the other accomplishments that you guys have done thus far. It's absolutely incredible, and I don't think a lot of people really understand how amazing it is to really get a bunch of not random individuals, but people who don't know each other to really band together and fight for a goal and succeed. It's definitely not something that's very easy.
Yeah, well, it wasn't always easy or ever easy, really. But I think that we were all kind of united behind this project and our goals that we needed to achieve. And there were many times where we thought, that we're not going to be able to hit this milestone. But people would go above and beyond. I mean, literally, people were sacrificing their their free time for their own hobbies, their social time for their friends and family, um, and spent weekends and evenings just putting together these packages, reports, um, doing designs, running simulations, documenting all of this to submit to SpaceX. And it was quite easy up to a certain point when we were just working virtually. Um, we were putting together preliminary designs, testing them, uh, you know, uh, making revisions on them. And then we kind of passed all these milestones, and then we were invited to, I think they invited 22 teams initially to the first competition. And that day they kind of made the announcement of the teams. It was like a big, I mean, it was a pleasant surprise for us, but then the reality that we had to actually now build hardware, and that was like an entirely different challenge for us. But I think that's one of the major successes of rLoop in our community was being able to turn that virtual work, those designs, into a physical, functioning, intangible prototype.
Very cool. And can you give us a little bit of an idea as to exactly why you decided to run an ICO or TGE? Because an organization like rLoop, it wouldn't be hard to get VC funding or just wealthy investors to fund the entire project. I know VH1, Virgin Hyperloop 1, you don't know what that meant. It was invested by Richard Branson like a year and a half ago, a while back, and basically helping them to develop their project. What is the difference between rLoop and what you guys are doing, and how you're basically enabling the world and different communities to get involved?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few things. I mean, one of our biggest core values is the involving the crowd and the community in every aspect that we can. So actually, when we first were figuring out how we could fund the manufacturing of our first prototype pods, we ran an Indiegogo campaign.
I remember
And
that.
yeah, we didn't. We thought, it just kind of stayed true to our values of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding. So we ran that successfully, and were able, with that and a few corporate sponsorships, to finance the manufacturing of our first pod. You'd be surprised when you go to people and say, I'm going to take a team of volunteers and we're going to build some next generation unproven technology. The wallets don't exactly open up.
No, not really.
But again, sticking to our kind of core principles, we thought we want everybody to be able to get involved, not only in the creation, the scrutiny, and the development of technology like this, but also being able to get get involved in other capacities. If you're not able to actually contribute knowledge or expertise, that we can involve the community in other ways. So actually, it wasn't long after we started working and we started to realize that there's a lot of value in the community and the processes that we were developing to facilitate collaboration, that we started to think, how are we going to kind of quantify the contributions that people are making, so that in the event that the technology is exploited ultimately, commercially, there's questions about ownership of intellectual property, who has right to whatever rewards. If we are exploiting it commercially, where does that money go to? Who does it belong to? And it was back then, actually, I think it was in 2015 or early 2016 when we came across the idea of blockchain technology and DAOs, which we'd kind of unwittingly started a DAO without knowing really what it was. We were kind of, every day was like a new day for us, and we were just kind of organically growing, learning where there were frictions to this new kind of style of work and collaboration, and then developing processes to mitigate that while trying to nurture the kind of positives that were coming out. And so, we've been researching the concept and how it would function for the better part of 2 to 2.5 years now.
Awesome. So you kind of touched on it about bringing in a DAO into the rLoop network, because I think that's an ingenious way to bring about a lot of different organizations now. And I think you guys are the start to a lot of some of these pretty amazing futuristic projects that are going to be using DAOs. Now, how are you going to make that scalable and efficient? Because your community of developers, engineers, and all of that, it's over like 1,000 people. Now, how is that going to end up being efficient? Because there could be a lot of unnecessary stuff, for lack of better words, that you'll have to deal with in this DAO. So how are you going to basically communicate with different members around that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's definitely something that we've been researching for some time, and we know that there's a lot of others doing a lot of research specifically on this. Scalability of a DAO and resilience of a DAO to external manipulation. So what we kind of had done was we'd realized the processes that we had developed, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't without some hardships or some frictions along the way, but for the large part, everyone had the kind of the shared passion and the shared interests towards coming up with the most viable solution to an engineering challenge or a technical challenge of some sort. And so we started to think back several years ago, is this process repeatable? Can we apply it to other projects of similar nature? And, when we were talking about some of the passions of the different members within the community, what incentivized them to participate within rLoop, there were a lot of similarities. People love working on these kind of grand challenges, just having an outlet for their passion and their knowledge, and being able to apply it to something that is challenging. There were people who said, I love working on projects like this, and I don't have the opportunity where I'm currently situated geographically. So these opportunities just are not open to me. And the other is, when you get out of school or you start a family, you realize that you have to work to finance your life. You have bills to pay, so you can't necessarily relocate, take that risk. So you find yourself, like I always joke that you find yourself designing lawnmower blades to pay your bills, but you're like super passionate about creating technology that can have a real impact on the world. And so I think, if we are able to harness that, and what I usually say as well is that the human capacity for innovation is like a limitless resource. And if we can tap into that and direct it to these large scale moonshot engineering projects, that we can solve a lot of the challenges that you know, humanity and the planet faces. Now, with a DAO kind of structure, we are not necessarily bound by the same incentivizations, if that's a word, incentives that that a traditional company would have. So, I mean, we can target projects and technology that's low TRL, that's low technology readiness level, something that could be 5 to 10 years out. We can start projects now, set them on an intercept course, so that we're kind of ahead of the curve when it does become feasible. Or and how that, what the blockchain technology lets us do is, you know, give people some skin in the game. We can introduce some game theory and economics to it all, such that we can incentivize productive behavior. We can disincentivize counterproductive or malicious behavior.
All through reputation?
Yeah, well, there's a variety of ways that you can do it. What we had envisioned and are testing is a reputation mechanism coupled with a kind of token staking model. So as you contribute in various capacities, and we've got a kind of variety of metrics that we'd be measuring, your reputation score would increase, which would essentially increase your the weight to your voting capabilities. And then in the same way, counterproductive, or, I mean, we're taking a lot of hints essentially from Reddit, where we came from, right?
Gotcha.
The idea being you upvote positive ideas or concepts, they rise to the top, you downvote stuff that is counterproductive or negative, sinks to the bottom. Reputation is a non-transferable component, so it's unique to the individual, but the tokens would be transferable. So it's, you know, a way to mitigate against
bad actors, basically.
Yeah, or people just trying to buy a lot of tokens and then influence the community in certain ways. What we really want to do is have community-driven projects and have people who contributed to those projects have a stake directly proportionate to the contributions that they're making.
Gotcha.
And
So
blockchain tech lets us do that in a transparent and immutable way.
Awesome. And I think that's probably why you guys started to research into it and get a feel for how it all works. Now, if someone comes up with an idea, let's say the world needs a flying toaster, okay? Completely random and just made up, but let's say the world needs a flying toaster and someone says, I have an idea as to how to build it or whatnot. Are they able to use the rLoop DAO to try and, I guess, make that sort of dream a reality? I hate using that term, but to try and create what their innovation is, because we're all entrepreneurs, and we're trying to build something that we have a lot of passion for. So say that some of the community members in the network want to try and construct something or create something that other people haven't thought of or done before, because you have 3 products that you're working on right now: the rBridge, rFlight, and the Hyperloop pod. Now, let's say someone...
Or if you include the blockchain side.
Sorry, always got to include the blockchain. Now, let's say someone comes up with a 5th idea, and it's just like some random Joe Schmo, and people really like the idea. Would people be able to start working on prototypes and, I guess, figuring out how it might actually be able to work, or would it be like a different process for that?
Yeah, no, I think that's quite similar to what we are envisioning. First of all, I'm sorry I'm chugging coffee while we're talking. I've been funneling coffee for months now to keep me moving.
Gotta love
it. Yeah, so what we had was, I think there's multiple levels that we can have people bring in concepts for development by the community. There's either an individual coming with an idea to the community and saying, here's my basic concept. I need help developing it and seeing if it's feasible, and also if it's something that the community wants to adopt and allocate some resources towards. There could be a group of people who come with an already formed or somewhat formed idea and say, this is what we've worked on. This is how far we've brought it. We would like to engage with the community to help develop it and really make it a success. And then the third would be an external party, a company, an organization who has an idea, has some kind of innovative technologies they want to develop, cannot allocate the resources towards it, or can't do it in a quick and efficient manner.
Gotcha.
But we want to make sure, as it's a community of volunteers who are working on these projects, there has to be sufficient support from them. There has to be a life cycle for the project. There has to be appropriate milestones, budgets tied to those milestones, and then we have to have the community essentially saying yes, that we would support this, and we want to develop it. Some cases it could be a super complex system like the Hyperloop. We literally had dozens of teams working on different components, subsystems, that all had to, I mean, it was very complex and interdependent work that was being done. And I think that's very important. This isn't like a normal bounty system where it's, I'm requesting work to be done. One person say, I'll do the work. There's a transaction done.
Gotcha.
This is complex, interdependent engineering or technical problems that we've developed essentially a system to break down and allow a community who is distributed around the world to pick up and develop and contribute towards. So yeah, I mean, what we want to initially focus on is those high impact projects that are driven by the community. You talked about prototyping, for example. That's actually what rBridge is focused on initially. We had also developed a way to connect our kind of virtual designers and engineers with the real world makers and manufacturers who could produce these components and subsystems that we had designed. rBridge is a way to kind of encode that process and allow people to come in and essentially say, I have this prototype or concept that I've designed. I have no way to manufacture it or create a prototype myself. And that's the initial focus of rBridge, is being able to bridge that gap from the virtual designers and engineers and the real world makers and manufacturers, based on our existing, several years of building multiple prototypes for the Hyperloop.
Gotcha. And you guys are using AR and VR for rBridge, and to share the files, do you use IPFS?
We don't currently use IPFS. It is the ultimate goal to transition to IPFS. So we were working with a few different companies and individuals on developing AR and VR solutions to connect the virtual team with the makers and manufacturers. Um, there have been quite some incredible advancements in the space in the past few years, and we're trying to
I
keep up
completely agree.
on top of it all. But yeah, it is a major focus. I mean, that's one thing we would really love to do. Besides, you and I having a video conference and chatting, if we could have a telepresence in the same room or in a kind of virtual space
And
where
looking at like the same thing and kind of talking about it, because
not just talking about it, we can look at full-scale models, full-scale assemblies. We could manipulate them so we can see in detail. We can explode them out. We can look at what would be amazing, and it's not. It's. I know there's work going on in the space, but what would be amazing is if we could actually do some computing in that environment. So if we could actually run simulations in this virtual space while you and I are present. That's the kind of stuff that we're working towards. Um, but there's also, not, again, there's a massive community behind us. Not everyone has access to, $600 or $1,000 VR getup.
yeah.
So we're trying to find out the best way that we can do that using the simplest technology available. We'd previously got a bunch of like Google Cardboard, which are like $5 or $10, and your smartphone, and then we can do some cool stuff in AR and VR, right? So yeah, it's interesting. It's something that we're trying to keep at the forefront of. I think there's a lot of potential for that, and actually Autodesk, who is one of our sponsors, full disclosure, they had recently demonstrated something along these lines, and I forget the name now of the project, but they were able to manipulate a motorcycle model in real time in this virtual environment, scale it, change colors, change features, change the design, change the rake on the forks, that kind of thing. And they were demonstrating this publicly. So it's it's amazing the kind of technology that's coming online currently, and I'm really excited to see what we'll have available to us in the next 5 years and next 10 years.
That's incredible. Now, do you have an idea as to when some of that stuff is going to go live and you're going to be able to interact, I guess, virtually with these, I guess, prototypes, different devices, or is it already live?
Well, there are products that are already live. I've seen a lot in the architecture space, actually. And I've seen them being used in manufacturing as well. I mean, with all technology, the initial implementation is usually more basic, but it's usually on an exponential development scale. And in a blink of an eye, it'll be going from Atari to PlayStation or Xbox. I've seen them in manufacturing spaces now where a developer will have the goggles on and they can just look at a barcode or something on a chemical, and all of the like MSDS and other relevant worksheets would come up, so they can see without needing to go and sort through binders to parse for the relevant data. I've also seen it used in prototyping, actually, so where you would have a prototype being built and kind of the virtual model being compared to it, and it would actually tell you this part goes here, you've installed this backwards the wrong way.
That's
So
wild.
that's
That's awesome.
yeah, yeah. And I know as well that NASA had been developing some so that their engineers here on Earth can work with the astronauts on the ISS in this kind of virtual space to walk them through repairs or other kind of stuff that it's just not feasible to send a dozen engineers up. kind of thing. So it's really cool. It's really exciting, and like I said, it's going to explode very quickly, I think.
Oh, I
We're
agree. I think,
just kind of at the beginning.
yeah, it's probably just, I think it's similar to how blockchain technology has really evolved. AR and VR, I think, is going to really exponentially grow. I think we really needed to just get the technology first to really build upon it and improve on it. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot in the blockchain sector as well. Um, and you're talking about a lot of this stuff with rBridge, and it keeps just popping into my head about Westworld. I don't know if you're familiar with the that show on HBO, but where you can basically control, and they basically like control and like make humans. It's a wild show. It's pretty cool.
I'm familiar with it. I've heard it mentioned before, but I've never seen it.
Definitely recommend it. It's awesome. But aside from that, it's amazing to see how all of these different use cases are bringing brought into the picture. And I think by using AR and VR, it's going to really help not only engineers building prototypes and collaborating with each other from different parts of the globe. We're probably going to start seeing, as you mentioned, like doctors being able to collaborate from all over and being able to be in a virtual, let's say, emergency room doing surgeries, repairs, whether you're a mechanic, all these different kinds of things. And it's just going to keep blowing up.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are the kind of applications that would have major impact. And it was something, I think it's somewhat relevant. People often overlook the actual serious, impactful applications that these technologies can have. People think about AR and they think of Pokemon Go or something like that, right? I remember getting my first, I had an iPod Touch back, 10 years ago or something. And I was like, wow, what an amazing piece of technology. Like I can get these apps, and I was like, okay, what can I do with this? And my friend was like, there's a lot of great games. And I was like, okay, great. So we have this amazing piece of technology and we're going to play games on it. Is that really its sole purpose kind of thing? But I think, people often overlook or neglect the very impactful applications that these technologies can have. Like you said, imagine having a specialist anywhere in the world being able to virtually be present during a surgery or something like that. I mean, we're talking life-saving and game-changing.
Oh, it's incredible. I think it's going to not only save a lot of lives, I think it's also going to help businesses and people save money, a lot of money on overhead, just because you're not going to have to hire as many people. Let's say you're a teacher, you can be in a virtual classroom and teach 10,000 people at once. I mean, that's kind of crazy, but there's a lot of different things that you can use with it.
Absolutely. We use now, actually, I'm an advisor at my the college that I went to school for engineering, and they have a program called the Global Classroom. And the idea is taking a subject or a topic, and then connecting our classroom with 4 different classrooms in different geographical areas around the world, and then discussing and bring in a couple speakers, a couple experts on the topic, and they will discuss the topic. And what you get exposed to is the different kind of cultural mentalities around that topic that you might not normally be exposed to here in Canada for me, and Detroit for you, right, Mark?
Well, just the States. I'm in DC right now.
Oh, okay, yeah. But yeah, so they'll have classes in with Russia, Japan, Germany, and Canada all in one kind of 2-hour session. Now, right now it's done through video conferencing, but yes, imagine we can actually have a telepresence. It's amazing.
Wild.
It's it's going to be a more prosperous and more wealthy future, I think, for everybody, as long as we are conscious as well of the kind of moral and ethical issues that come along with developing technologies like these. And it's something else that I wrote about recently after seeing a talk on the subject, that, with a lot of these innovative and disruptive technologies, there comes a lot of moral and ethical questions.
Agreed.
And we would be wise to pay attention to them in advance. I know the mentality of the engineers and the techies is, let's develop the technology, let's make it happen. But there is something to be said for having that foresight of what the implications might very well be of said technology.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about like CRISPR and weaponized drones and
just robotics, AI, and all that stuff.
Absolutely. But it's going to, I genuinely think, and I'm obviously biased, but that we will be able to realize a more prosperous and healthy future for everybody through advancements in technology.
Agreed. So can you try and touch on, we never really talked about it too in depth, what rFlight is? We've talked a lot about the Hyperloop pod, a little bit about blockchain, a bunch about rBridge, AR, and VR. So what is rFlight?
rFlight's a really cool project. The idea is to have a personal flight device that allows anybody to experience the feeling of flight. Not a flying car or a flying taxi, but something that allows you as an individual to fly. Now, it is in context of a competition, another competition that we entered, that is sponsored by Boeing. And so there are kind of restrictions and parameters around the design that we're allowed to build. But essentially, it's a device that you would be harnessed to. So you're not in a cockpit or in any kind of enclosure. And you would take off vertically and then transition to horizontal flight. And one of the parameters was that during normal flight, you would not see the vehicle in front of you.
Gotcha.
So when you're in horizontal flight and you're flying, in your normal line of sight, you won't see the vehicle. So the idea is
you're strapped on, you're held on to it on your back.
Yeah, what we had designed was like a harness with a mounting mechanism around the chest that would interface with the vehicle itself. Yeah, so that project has been in the works for, I want to say, about 9 months now or so. And we're actually moving into prototyping of the vehicle, hopefully within the next 2 months. And I started to get my trained to get my pilot's license specifically because I want to fly this thing.
That'd be awesome.
But the idea ultimately is that it would be something that anybody would be able to fly. You wouldn't need a pilot's license for. Ultimately, we would love for it to be an electric vertical takeoff and landing personal vehicle. We dub it the motorcycle of the sky kind of thing. And you can find out some info on our website about it, some further info. Yeah, and in context of the Hyperloop, one of the things that we were able to achieve, there were a few things that we were able to achieve on that project, which I think are noteworthy and worth mention. We had a static levitation, it's a magnetic levitation system that we use. it's a static levitation, so we can essentially turn the vehicle on and it'll levitate in place. We were able to do that in a vacuum chamber at SpaceX. And we also built a pressure vessel built to FAA regulations that was also tested and held 1 bar, which is capable of sustaining human life. At least publicly, no other Hyperloop group organization has demonstrated that. So for our community to have built that to FAA regs and tested it successfully was a huge, huge milestone.
That's incredible. Well, congratulations to you guys. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's all the team. It's all the hard work from dozens and hundreds of people.
So let's say someone from the community who's watching this wants to try and get involved. They're very passionate about what you guys are doing and want to get involved with rLoop and your network of individuals. How can they do that? Do they have to go to your subreddit? Can they just join your Telegram channel? Do they have to join the Slack? Like, what's that process look like?
Yeah, all the communication happens on Slack. It is a private Slack, so you need an invite to get in. We have a sign-up form. It definitely needs updating. It's very Hyperloop-centric right now. But you can go to join.rloop.org and fill out a little information about yourself. We want to know what what goals and objectives you have as an individual, so that we can get you situated quickly within the right team and with the right kind of group of people, so that you can get up to date in terms of all the tools that we use and the kind of culture that we have at rLoop. And what we found is that the quicker we can get somebody participating in a meaningful way, the more engaged they become and stay. So we've worked a lot on that specifically, which was something that was never a concern when we started out. We were all engineers or technical people, and then all of a sudden found, oh, you know what, we actually have to focus a lot on human resources and onboarding, and it became a huge aspect. And actually we use AI within rLoop for a lot of those processes.
Very cool. So before we get too wrapped up, I wanted to ask you a question that was brought up among conversation that I was having about rLoop. So when you're traveling, you mentioned they can go to a max speed of about 765 mph?
Yeah, about Mach 1.
Not bad. Pretty fast. So you're traveling at these intense speeds. Will there need to be any regulations or concerns about people who have heart issues or high blood pressure or anything of that matter?
So what you do essentially, and it's a good question. First of all, there are no existing regulations, right? So that's one of the kind of aspects of the Hyperloop that has to be developed. And there are Hyperloop groups that have formed specifically to work with regulators to try and develop a framework that is safe and feasible, but also does not impede the development of the technology. It's like we often say, it's faster than a plane, but as convenient as a train. So it's the kind of the same thing with the regulations. It's not exactly a train, and it's not exactly a plane, and there's nothing that has come before it. So there's just no framework for it currently. But in terms of the experience from a passenger's perspective, it's envisioned to be quite similar to being in an aircraft. So you're in a pressurized cabin, just like you would be on an aircraft. And then all we do is limit the acceleration to about the same that you would experience during takeoff on a plane.
Gotcha. Okay,
So it'll
that
be
makes a
quite
lot of
similar.
sense.
Yeah, there would obviously have to be, I think, extensive testing on a full-scale system before you would want any passengers being able to take trips. And I think it's several years before we're actually going to see anything that can be actually implemented at scale. But yeah, it's a very valid concern or question rather. The positives that the Hyperloop has going for it is that there is extensive data from the history of aviation and the history of rail that we can build off of and use in order to make the system as safe as possible. And I think the system is designed inherently to be safer than existing modes of transport. And when you're talking about rail, for example, the leading causes of accidents are weather-related, debris on the track, or human error. Well, the pods are going to be in a tube or in a tunnel, so we're not exposed to the external elements. As we're in a tube or a tunnel, nothing can get on the track. There's no possibility for debris, and the vehicles are going to be autonomous. So we're removing the human factor from the equation. Right there, we've wiped out some of the biggest causes or of concern for rail right off the bat. So just, we can draw on this years and years and decades of existing data just to make a safer mode.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
not just designed to be sustainable and quicker, but it's designed to be safer as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We've seen a lot of research just being done with autonomous vehicles. I did a lot of research probably 3 years ago about the development of autonomous vehicles for one of my classes at my university. And it's incredible how far we're coming with this technology and using the different applications of it in different aspects. Because if everybody in the world had an autonomous vehicle, it would be safe. The roads would be far safer. Commutes would be a lot less. For me, having to drive into DC is a pain in the neck. I hate it. Drivers are wacko. Probably takes 10 years off my life just having to do that sometimes. And I mean, you could just sit back and relax and you could be chugging your cup of coffee on the way to work and not having to worry about changing lanes, trying to get into traffic. It would all be done automatically. And all of these different vehicles would be interconnected and communicating with each other.
Yeah, right. I just remembered there was a report put out or a study put out by the Rand Corporation back in the 70s. It was this very similar concept to the Hyperloop, but it was called, I think it was called the transplanetary system or something like that. But their idea was to connect like LA to New York, I think it was, like cross the US. Mm-hmm. In a very similar system. And this actually, sorry, I apologize, but this goes back to the question about acceleration and the experience for people with heart complications or something along those lines. But they were trying to connect them in the shortest time possible. And what it was it would take off and start accelerating, and it would continue to accelerate for 50% of the journey. And then the last 50%, it would be decelerating. So you'd constantly be in a state of either acceleration or deceleration. But you could get from like LA to New York in like an hour and change.
That's crazy. It's just hard to imagine some of that stuff.
That was in the 70s. That was like, 45 years ago.
Wow. That's wild. A lot of futurists out there. I love it.
And what's amazing is that we're kind of at this unique point now where a lot of these technologies are becoming feasible or accessible. You know,
Agreed.
when I think Google's autonomous car or Waymo started, I think the sensors on them were something like either $250,000 or $500,000. I forget the specific number, but it was one of those two per vehicle, right? And now that's what, I don't know, 10 to 15 years timeline. Now it's like $50 for those sensors that allow it to be autonomous. So, you know, it's not just the tech becoming feasible, but it becoming accessible and economical as well.
Agreed. And I
We're,
remember.
we're at a wicked point in time, I think.
Oh, I agree, and we've been seeing it with just storing data, the power of a CPU. I mean, you can name basically everything in the tech world over time gets more powerful and cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like my family just bought a Zumba robot, like one of those electric robot things. And I was like, why did you buy that? Just wait 2 or 3 years and it's going to be a heck of a lot better, save you more money. But everything's just going to continue to evolve. And it's just incredible to think about where we're going to be in 5 years. So do you have any final thoughts or anything that we didn't get to touch on or upcoming announcements that you'd like to share? Or just a tip of advice for anybody who's watching?
Sure, yeah. Well, rLoop has um, some announcements in the works. I'm not at liberty to discuss publicly currently, but stay tuned for some, I think, some pretty interesting updates and announcements. We were actually also featured on a History Channel program called Project Impossible. I don't have the air date in the US as of yet, but I believe it's towards the end of August. So they visited our manufacturing team and followed us for a little bit, so you can see some of the team there, some of the work that went into the prototype pod and the vehicle itself. And some advice maybe I usually say this to people is you know, you want to really find what you are passionate about and devote yourself to it entirely. There will be a lot of hardships that you have to overcome, and if it's not something that you are very passionate about, you're not going to have the endurance or the legs to overcome those difficulties. But if it's something that you love and that you're truly passionate about, regardless of the difficulties that may come, it will be a pleasure working on it, and you can't imagine doing anything else but working on it. And I think that's what I found at rLoop, and I think numerous other people did as well. And that's really what we hope to harness is everybody's passions and direct them towards a common and impactful points.
I love it. Awesome. Thanks for your, I guess, your little nugget of wisdom, a little golden nugget. Well, Brent, it was a pleasure having you out here. I look forward to seeing what goes on with this project. I hope I can be one of your biggest supporters. I love what you guys are doing, and I'm definitely going to continue following some of your announcements and how the project develops. I'm absolutely pumped to try and bring this new technology to the world, businesses, and society. I think it's absolutely revolutionary.
Well, thanks very much, Mark. It's great to chat with you and speak with you today. It was great, and I hope that we can do it again in the future.
My pleasure. All right. Well, Brent, have a good one.
You as well. Thanks, man.